Hello, you're listening to Rebloom, a gentle space for women's health where science meets compassion and stigma has no home. I'm Tegan, and each week we slow down, peel back the noise, and make room for clarity about our bodies, our hormones, and most importantly, our lived experiences. This is a place to unlearn stigma, understand your body, feel supported as you navigate your own version of health. No shame, no overwhelm, just honest conversations, practical knowledge, and the space to grow. I'm so glad you're here, and let's rebloom together. Hi guys, so this is part 2 of Grief with Sasha. So we're going to be talking about her dad who passed away and her experience with grief. If you haven't listened to part 1, I would suggest going there to get a bit more background. So 45.5% of people over 16 years old have experienced at least grief of one parent. This shows that it's really not an uncommon thing. So like you're saying, this woman presuming that, both of your parents were still alive, it just shows that it's not actually an assumption that should be made. But obviously I know it's something that still feels really isolating. So what can someone who is experiencing grief from a parent do to quote unquote feel better or, sort of get through the day?
I think for me, the biggest thing was just allowing myself to feel and act how I needed to. And by that, I don't mean lashing out when people say unhelpful things.
Yeah.
Like, I just mean that I gave myself permission to not go to uni if I needed to. I gave myself permission to go to a seminar and leave if I needed to, and not feel like I had to explain myself to people.
Yeah.
And I think just giving myself that permission to be how I needed to be and kind of be authentic with how I was feeling was probably the most helpful thing that I could do, because I think a big thing that I was doing at the beginning was kind of policing my own reactions.
Yeah.
And I think if I felt happy that day, I was then be like, how dare you clearly don't care.
Yeah.
And then if I felt sad, I'd be like, well, you've got a degree to finish. He's not going to be proud. And I was spinning this narrative in my head where I was really policing what I was feeling, which was just really unkind and really unhelpful.
Yeah.
So I think just letting yourself feel how you need to feel and kind of living authentically, as silly as that sounds, I think is the most powerful thing that you can do. And I think trying as hard as you can to not be affected by other people's uncomfortableness of the situation.
Yeah.
And that's really, really difficult. And it's still something that I'm not the best at now. But if someone says to you, oh, you don't look very happy, what's wrong? And you tell them the truth and they get uncomfortable, that's on them. And I don't mean that in a harsh way. I just mean that they have asked you a question, you have given them the honest response, and they then don't know how to deal with that. And we don't know how to deal with it because we don't talk about death enough in society. We don't talk about how to deal with it. We don't talk about how to support people. And that's why I think conversations like this are so important. But
100.
it makes it really difficult as a grieving person. And as I said earlier about that kind of emotional labour, that emotional toll, when you're just trying to get through the day without having a mental breakdown,
Yeah.
it's so difficult to then feel like you're having to take on that, what my counsellor called emotional poo from other people.
Yeah.
And I think it's just not taking that on and being a little bit selfish and looking after yourself and prioritising self-care, however that looks like for you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, but it's, yeah, I don't think there's a one size fits all approach, but I know those were the things that made a difference to my life.
Definitely. And I think, like you said, everyone experiences grief differently. So people are going to, you know, cope in different ways and they're going to need different strategies to help them. So I definitely understand that. And I think I really liked what you said about being authentic and not holding everyone else's emotional pill, because I think it is something that we really do a lot in our day to day anyway. And so if you're going through something like grief, I can imagine that extra, you don't need that extra stuff on your plate. But yeah, no, definitely. Thank you so much. How would you say that you balanced your day to day whilst grieving? Because obviously you said you was a uni student, you was using your third year, so you was probably looking at what you need to do after uni, got dissertations coming up, and then just trying to figure out your own grief. So how did you manage it, basically?
I, and this is an incredibly helpful answer, I genuinely don't know.
Yeah.
I think I went into survival mode, as I think a lot of people do.
Yeah.
I think obviously mine was a little bit more complicated in terms of like navigating university, because so my dad passed away in November 2019.
Mm.
We then obviously went into COVID lockdown
Yeah.
in March 2020. So was not only having to navigate grief, but was also navigating not getting the grief of not getting to finish my third year of uni and
Yeah.
leaving everything, and what that looked like, trying to navigate what it looked like to live in this, pandemic world that we all lived in.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it was an incredibly complicated time where I, yeah, probably pushed things down more than I should have, because I was just trying to, yeah, get on and kind of push through and kind of survive every day. And I think it wasn't really until I kind of moved back to Leicester when I came back for uni
Mm.
that I think then all the feelings kind of caught up with me a little bit.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, I wouldn't say I necessarily balanced it hugely well then. I think probably the grief was the catalyst for a fun then
Yeah.
mental health situation. But yeah, unhelpful answer. I wouldn't say I necessarily balanced it. I'm incredibly proud of myself for what I achieved. On paper, looked pretty good. I got a first in my degree. Me and my friend Ella, that I said, who was a medical student, we captained our team to get to nationals for the first time in 3 years.
Amazing.
With the day that we qualified for nationals being the day before my dad's funeral.
Oh, bless you.
So when you look at it from that, it sounds like I was able to achieve everything, and that, I maybe was balanced, but I think I prioritized those achievements and kind of keeping on going, and maybe didn't let myself feel in the way that I need to on a big scale. I waited for those little triggers that I talked about, and then I would kind of let myself live authentically. But I think
Yeah.
I could have maybe done a better job at accessing support earlier than I did.
Yeah.
Because it took me about a year and a half to start counselling and to really talk about it in the way that I needed to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's a learning process though, because obviously you've not been through it before. You're trying to figure out what you need to do for you, and that would have been counselling. But it's okay that it took you a year and a bit to figure that out, that you needed it.
100%. Obviously, yeah, living in the COVID environment didn't help.
No.
So, I don't blame myself
No.
for that. But yeah, it was just incredibly complicated. And I think when I did look at grief, like support and stuff like that, a lot of it was tailored at older people, or it was like specifically for cancer survivors, or a lot of it was kind of obviously charities that are specific for specific things.
Yeah.
It would be like for baby loss, for cancer, for suicide, for anything like that. All amazing organisations and causes, by the way. Not that I'm, but I didn't feel that there was really a place for me, because I wasn't a child,
Yeah.
but I was also barely an adult. Like, as I said, I was 21, I was still at uni. I felt like a kid,
Yeah.
even though I wasn't one. And I think a lot of the spaces that I found kind of online or in the community didn't feel like they were going to serve me or have what I needed. So um, I think that was kind of a big struggle as well, was finding what was actually going to help, even once I'd made that decision that actually I did need that, and that obviously took quite a long time.
Yeah.
Then finding a suitable kind of support system was quite difficult.
Yeah. Do you think that over time that we've got more support available for people who've gone through similar stuff?
Um, I think there is organisations that kind of pop up. So I know there's one, I think they called it Life with Loss or Living with Loss. I can't quite remember.
Yeah.
And I think their focus is, I think, grievers under 35, I think,
Oh,
potentially.
okay.
But they had a Leicester support group, and then it closed pretty much as soon as I found it,
Oh no.
because a lot of it was volunteer led, which obviously is a big problem within the charity sector, which I can rant on about for ages, so I won't. But I think the problem is that they rely on volunteers, they rely on community, they rely on people being willing to do that
Yeah.
and they've put themselves out there and use their story to help other people. Which, yeah, is a lot and it's a big burden. And I don't think I could potentially, obviously, I used it, as I said, a little bit at work, but I don't think I could lead a group support group even now,
Yeah.
even with my kind of personal and professional experiences of working in mental health and for everything that I've been through. So I genuinely don't know. I know that there is counselling services out there, but I think it's very difficult when you're kind of a young adult
Yeah.
in the kind of grieving space. I think there's a bit of a gap here, and you are a little bit left to fend for yourself.
Yeah.
If other people have other experiences, and they have kind of support services, then yeah, let Tegan know because I'd love to know.
Yeah.
But from my experiences and my research, it's probably a bit of a postcode lottery, I presume.
Okay. Okay. That makes sense. I think it definitely, like you said, it highlights a gap where there isn't that support and there's that like big gap. Especially when you mentioned like grieve is like designed for more older people and like helping them cope. But like you said, they like with some of your older siblings, they had their parent for longer and you've had that anger, which is obviously completely fine, but it's like how do you talk to someone about that if you've not got the support equipped to help you like understand that emotion and sort of like unpick it in a way?
Yeah, 100%. You don't want it to kind of impact your relationships.
Yeah.
And I think even now it probably has impacted my relationships, especially with some of my older siblings.
Yeah.
Me and my brother Max, who, as I said, we're the closest in age, we've been able to have a lot of kind of really open, honest conversations. But I guess we're in a really similar situation. The only thing that I guess he got that I didn't was graduation.
Yeah.
But, we've both got partners now that our dad never met. Neither of us are married, but if we do go down that route, he wouldn't see that. So I think he understands it a little bit more.
Yeah.
Uh, he is far better at navigating the conversations with them than I think I am.
Yeah.
So yeah, all power to him for being able to do that. You know, I don't resent them. I just, as you said, it's complicated and it's something to navigate.
Yeah. 100%. I wanted to ask you as well, do you think that COVID and that isolation and that lockdown had a negative impact on your grief?
Interesting. I think so from an accessing support perspective,
Okay.
because as I said, I think I just didn't.
Yeah.
I think I very much kind of fell back into my life at home. So my youngest sister, she's got a different dad. She was 10. So she was in her last year of primary school. So a lot of it was me helping her in her like online school when she was in year 6, or like taking her to and from school when she could go back. So I think I very much kind of fell into a supportive role of supporting her,
Yeah.
which is a very comfortable place for me existing. And I think that's what I mean when I say that I kind of push my feelings aside.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, maybe. But I also was living with my brother, which I wasn't at the time because both of us were living separately, and then my mum was like, "Right, everyone back to the nest." Like,
Come
yeah,
on.
literally, she was like, "Right, you're done living your independent lives, back." So I think actually I had my brother there, which I wouldn't have if I'd still been in Leicester.
Yeah.
So I can imagine for a lot of people that isolation really didn't help their grieving experiences because they didn't have that support system, especially if they lived alone.
Yeah.
Like I think about like older people and the loneliness epidemic that we have there. And I hate to think about their experiences and the kind of exacerbated loneliness and isolation that they could have felt.
Yeah.
But I think for me, it brought me closer to that support system simply because of my situation.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, maybe I would have accessed support a little bit earlier had I not been kind of almost forced into a different alternate universe
Yeah.
of kind of that, example that I was using earlier. I think almost the pandemic then became another layer to that alternate universe. And then when I eventually stripped all of those back and was back into my normal kind of uni life with my normal friends, I was like, oh, okay,
Yeah.
now what? But that came, a year and a half later.
Yeah.
So
Definitely. Thank you. I was just curious because like I said, I've not been through grief, and I can imagine it because, like you said, like with the loneliness epidemic, and obviously I know that's for older people, but I think it's quite common for younger people as well.
Oh, 100%.
Um,
Yeah.
so I'm just curious on how you think it might have impacted you and your story. Yeah, that's just me being curious.
As you should be.
Bless you. Okay, so we've talked about support. So I wanted to ask you, what support do you think should be put in place for education, but also in the workplace?
Interesting. Education is like just in schools or like all?
All education.
Um, Interesting question. I think just having better support like within education, so within university.
Yeah,
So I my personal tutor and my dissertation tutor, they were amazing. They were so incredibly supportive and they really advocated for me and supported me. But my department from like an admin side were genuinely awful.
oh no.
So I that Thursday that I talked about, where I kind of had the realization and I cried after watching Afterlife, I was supposed to be delivering a presentation that day. It was 10% of my module grade. So realistically, nothing.
Yeah,
And I couldn't do it. I was like, yeah, I'll do it. And I said to my lecturer, I was like, no, I said to my personal tutor, I was like, should I just let him know that my dad's just died, just in case I like burst into tears in the presentation? And he was like, no, Sasha, you psychopath. No, don't presentation. I will tell him that you're not doing it and we'll rearrange. And I was like, okay.
yeah,
Kind of went on with my life. And my personal tutor, he'd kind of put a thing out that basically said any communication with me would go through him.
yeah.
And him and my dissertation tutor were like best mates anyway.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah, it was well cute. So they were very much supportive, but everything that I received had kind of already been filtered through them because he was like, I don't want people harassing you. I want that kind of protection. If you need me, let me know.
Yeah,
But that's that. So, missed this presentation and I started getting emails about sending over a death certificate. And at that point, I didn't have it because it was a sudden death. So he had to have an autopsy. So it takes a while to get that death certificate. You
yeah,
also have to get certified copies. So I had to go down to Hastings where my dad lived, get a certified copy from my stepmom, which then became more admin for my stepmom,
yeah,
who was obviously had just lost her partner. And there was me being like, I'm really sorry, but I'm going to need a copy of the death certificate because you are harassing me. So it wasn't just impacting me,
yeah,
it was impacting my stepmom, my siblings that were supporting her. And so, started getting harassed. And I had to fill out this form that genuinely said, and this is going to sound like a joke, genuinely said, explain how these circumstances are out of your control.
I just have no words. What?
To which I wanted to write, I didn't kill him.
Yeah,
Like, you. And then I think the other one was explain how this situation means that you can't do your duty. And I was just like, are you actually joking? And it turns out it's because it's the same form that they use for like illness and stuff like that.
okay,
But I'm like, again, what if someone got diagnosed with cancer? That like it
yeah.
blows my mind to this day, and I believe they still use the same form.
Oh, wow.
Because I did ask someone when I later ended up working on a project that was partnered with the uni. So I just think better training for
Yeah,
staff, whether that's in schools and universities and workplaces, to understand grief
yeah,
and to understand that admin side. And I understand that, they've got to prove that people aren't faking it, but I just don't think that's a priority. I'm going to be so honest.
no,
And I think having that, yeah, better training, better support. And as I said, I was incredibly lucky that my actual lecturers were all amazing and really, really supportive and were very much, willing to go for war to war for me.
yeah,
But yeah, the way that I was treated, it then meant so I had a conversation with the lecturer who was leading that module. And he'd said to me that he'd dealt with a similar situation at a previous university. And he was like, oh, that person was able to get mitigating circumstances for the whole year. And it just meant that if they were like on a grade boundary, they would be bumped up because the understanding that you're potentially going to drop a few marks because of your situation.
yeah,
And he was like, you could apply for that. And I think you'd have really reasonable grounds, like, we'll support you. And I didn't, out of fear, because I didn't want to go back and have to kind of explain and justify. And I felt like I was making excuses, which is ridiculous
Yeah.
because my dad had a heart attack. That's not normal circumstances, and that's an entirely reasonable reason to be distracted and to be struggling.
Yeah.
So I think honestly, just better staff training, more of an understanding, and treating people as innocent until proven guilty, because I genuinely felt like a bit of a criminal and that I'd lied,
Yeah.
which obviously wasn't the case. So I think that's kind of a big one. And then I would also say, in terms of workplaces, better bereavement policies in terms of leave.
Yes.
My first job that I had out of uni, my dad's dad passed away, and that was expected. He was very old. He was ill and stuff like that. And I kind of warned my manager that I kind of, I guess, knew it was coming, as awful as that sounds.
Yeah.
And she was very much like, look, just let me know, take the time that you need. But I got like a week off, and that was it.
Yeah.
And especially in a job where your whole, as I said, I was working in mental health cafes at the time. My entire job was supporting other people's emotions.
Yeah.
So to step back into that environment after a week, after a loss, and that was any loss.
Yeah.
That could be a parent, a sibling, a grandparent, anything. And they deemed that you only needed a week, I think is genuinely insane.
Yeah.
Realise that a lot of people will go to the doctors and they'll get, sick notes and stuff like that. But why are we making these processes so incredibly difficult for people when they're already emotionally vulnerable?
Exactly.
So I think, just better education, better understanding, and far more empathy.
100%. And I think some things that I thought about before the episode was, like you said with the admin, I was thinking as well with admin and leave, like having it wait longer, because, like your example, they're badgering you for a death certificate when they know that it's going to take a while. So they could have waited a little bit longer before they started asking. And like you said, obviously they need it, that's fine, but that doesn't make it any easier.
Well, it was also that they went, obviously, as I said, my personal tutor had sent out these instructions being like everything goes through him.
Yeah.
They went over his head to directly email me.
Yeah, that's not good.
So it is what it is now. And one of the reasons that I took the job in the crisis cafes because they were in the universities and I wanted to be that support that I didn't have. And so that if there was other people that were going through a similar situation, they had a place that they could go and I could be that advocate that I had with my lecturers. But we shouldn't need to be in that situation.
No, definitely not.
Anyone should just be met with kindness and support in the way that I was, luckily, by those lecturers.
Yeah.
Rather than feeling like they have to prove themselves. And death admin is a lot.
Yeah.
A lot of admin that comes with death that people don't necessarily understand. And as you said, if you're then kind of, pushing that off and all of that, that can delay so many different things and keep that within you as well. And
Yeah.
not kind of let you actually properly start that grieving process because you're just in survival mode under paperwork.
Yeah. 100%. If you're finding this episode helpful, it would mean so much if you could like this video and subscribe to the channel, or follow if you're listening on Spotify. It helps Rebloom reach much more women who deserve clear, stigma-free health conversations. And if you want to stay connected between episodes, come and join me on Instagram at rebloom_podcast or on TikTok at rebloom.podcast. That's where I share some educational posts, a little bit of behind the scenes, and some reminders as well. Alright, back to the episode. I think as well with what you said about the leave, I touched on this on another episode, but it was all about miscarriages. So we were saying, me and my co-host Charlotte, she was saying that we should have like a month off for grieving at least, like paid leave. Like how you get like maternity leave, paternity leave. There should be grief leave because it's something that impacts you so much, and you need that time. And like maybe for your case or someone who you might have worked with, if they lost someone, how can you expect them to come back to work and be able to support that person, be able to be in the mindset really to help someone in such a way, because it is an amazing job, but I can imagine it can be so difficult to try and do it whilst you're, going through grief yourself.
Yeah, 100%. And I think with the miscarriage example, I think there is kind of at least a campaign at the moment, if they haven't done anything already, to get women to be able to take their maternity leave if they have a stillbirth or something like that.
Yeah,
Um,
it's I can't remember if it's Scotland or Wales that they've just done it, and England are trying to implement it from 2027.
yeah, I really hope so that they, but why it's not a thing already is
Yeah,
genuinely insane. But yeah, the world and especially the UK isn't equipped to talk about grief and to deal with grief,
no,
whatever form or whatever situation that comes in.
no, definitely not.
Therefore, we end up with policies like that.
Exactly. And I think one other thing that I thought of is mental health first aid, because we every organisation, every company has to have a first aider on site. So
Yeah,
why don't they need a mental health first aider? Because if you're just having like a terrible day, you just need someone to talk to. You've got a person who is trained. They're meant to be there to listen to you. That can probably make all the difference.
yeah, 100%, 100%. Just, and I think also just having that as a company and being like, there is someone that you can talk to if you're having a crap time
Yeah,
means a lot because it creates that safer environment.
yeah,
That that's actually something they care about. And even if you don't want to go talk to that person, if they're a mental health friendly place and they've got mental health first aided, you feel better about going to your manager
yeah,
and going, actually, this is what I'm feeling because mental health is something that's kind of prioritized within their values. So
100.
I think even small things can make a massive difference.
Yeah, and like you said, you had your dissertation supervisor and your academic tutor for an advocate for you. If we had mental health first aiders, they could sort of be that advocate in the workplace, so that if there
100%.
is like managers that don't fully understand or anything, you've got that person in your corner, and they can be like, actually, she's going through a really rough time now, and this is why. You've got that person that you can go to. So I think that's stuff that I thought about, that should be implemented. And I think it's really interesting to hear like what you said about it as well, coming from someone who's gone through it and seen like how bad it is, and how, I'm trying to think of the right word here, how blind they are almost in education to stuff like this.
Yeah, I think it's just if people haven't gone through it, or I mean, we see it with everything, don't we? If people haven't gone through it, they don't necessarily understand it.
Yeah,
Um, but yeah, I think we just need more empathy for everything that everyone's going through, whether that's grief, whether that's mental health, whether that's physical health. We just need more empathy and more of a belief that people aren't trying to get out of something. They're genuinely just struggling. And that if you genuinely support that person and give them the time of day, you're probably going to get out of that situation what you want, rather than making them feel like crap and then them having to take more time off or something even worse than that.
yeah, definitely. We kind of touched on it just then when you said that. So say someone is going through grief, how can the people around them support them?
I think a big thing for me, as I've kind of said, kind of I think weaved through my answers, is not to be awkward about it.
Yeah,
I had so many awkward interactions with people. As I said, people would say, "Oh, what's wrong?" And I'd say, or even I had one where I was telling my boyfriend at the time that the girl who had bullied me in primary school had sent me condolences, which is a wild situation, but anyway. And he overheard the conversation and he went, "Well, why is someone sending you condolences?" And I was like, "Because my dad's passed away."
yeah,
And then he was really awkward and kind of made a bit of a joke out of it. And it was just a bit strange. So I think putting your uncomfortableness to the side and prioritizing kind of looking after that person.
yeah,
And I think it's because people don't know what to say and they don't want to upset that person.
yeah,
But one, the thing that I was always say to people, it's what I always say when someone talks to me about grief, is like, tell me like a happy memory about them. What's your favorite story?
yeah, I like that.
Because I feel like I'm not allowed to really tell stories about my dad anymore. Even though the stories that happened obviously when he was alive haven't changed. If he was still alive, I'd be able to tell that story. But
Yeah,
if all of my talking about someone's gone, "Oh, my dad did this funny thing the other day," someone else goes, "Oh, my dad's done a similar thing." If I then go, "Oh, my dad did a similar thing," people get awkward and
yeah,
people find it. rather than just listening to a funny story about my dad. And it makes me feel, I think other grievers feel, that's what causes that isolation.
Yeah.
And it makes us feel like we can't talk about our person anymore. So I think let them talk about their person. It's not necessarily sad.
Yeah.
And I think giving them that space to talk about the happy times
Yeah.
can make them feel better. And I think we don't get enough spaces and time to do that. So I think that would be my kind of biggest one. I think also not worrying that you're going to remind them. I find that one really strange. Like, I don't forget.
Yeah.
Like, you bring up my dad or say something, I haven't forgotten that he's died.
Yeah.
And again, I had a really strange one with this. I was at a social when I was at uni, and one of my friends, his brother had passed away. And I'd known his younger brother actually his older brother before I knew him.
Yeah.
And we were talking about this record for this challenge that we had within the club. And someone went, well, who's got the old record and who's, what is it? And I went, oh, it's Ollie's. It's the record is whatever it was.
Yeah.
And someone was like, well, we can't say that. And I was like, why?
Yeah.
And he was like, because it might upset Ziggy. And I was like, that's not your decision to make.
Yeah.
And actually, I went and had a conversation with Ziggy, and I was like, after they'd said whose it was, and I went, I've actually got a video. Would you like to see? And he was like, this is amazing.
Yeah.
And obviously, I can imagine that there was part of him that was a little bit like, had that, but I would always rather know. And I would always rather, because we don't forget.
No.
And actually for me, and I obviously can't speak for every griever, but when people bring up my dad in a story like that, I love it because it makes him feel real and that he's in other people's lives, because that one division feeling of living in an alternate universe is because people don't understand what you're going through. It's because they've not lost anything potentially, or at least that was, because I was at uni, people didn't know my dad. So when you're with people and they bring up your person and you feel that you're connected around this thing,
Yeah.
it reduces that isolation, and it's the most alive that they can be. That's why we have wakes, right? To celebrate that person and what they did. And you're supposed to tell all those happy stories, but that needs to continue beyond the funeral, beyond the wake. And that's, how we keep people's memories alive, I think.
I really like that. That's really sweet. I think that's a really good one. Because like you said, so many people just sort of like, the conversation stops, everyone goes quiet. And it's like people don't just like get through it in a way.
I think, yeah, we all have situations where we kind of have to put our own feelings aside.
Yeah.
And I think it's one of those times where you might find it uncomfortable. And I remember I had someone say to me, oh, well, it just makes me scared about losing my own parents. And they spoke about this kind of fear. And I was like, and I didn't say this at the time, but in my own head, I was like, but your fear is my reality.
Yeah.
And I totally understand that fear, because I still have parents. I still dread the day that I lose my mum. But that doesn't mean that I'm not allowed to talk about it. And it's not that I'm going up to them and being like, oh, did you know my dad had a heart attack?
Yeah.
I'm just sharing a funny story about when my dad did Gangnam Style at my school Christmas fair, in the same way that you're telling a funny story about your dad, and that is okay, and I'm allowed to do that.
Yeah.
And I think it's remembering that we're allowed to do that and enforcing that we're allowed to do that as well. As grieving people, we're allowed to talk about our people.
Yeah.
And if other people are uncomfortable, then that's something that they need to work through, not us.
Yeah. What would you say to anyone who does feel awkward in the moment? Like, what can they do?
I think just follow that person's vibe. When I said earlier about my big thing was just letting myself be what I needed to be in that situation,
Yeah.
letting that person be what they need to be in that situation.
Yeah.
And whether that's that they need to have a little bit of a cry and you give them a cuddle, whether that's you sense that they're maybe thinking about that person and you ask, like, as I said, at the Formula E with my boyfriend, when he was like, are you thinking about your dad? Because he'd kind of asking that question and being willing to engage in that conversation.
Yeah.
And not being, as I said, afraid that you're going to remind them.
Yeah.
But being there for them and trying to, I guess, mind read a little bit, as tricky as that is,
Yeah.
as to what they might. But I genuinely just think, going with the flow of what they're doing and seeing where that takes you, and that if you say something wrong,
Yeah.
you apologize in the same way that we would in a normal situation.
Yeah.
Like, we're not all expected get everything right 100% of the time, but I think most people would appreciate the effort or someone trying, even if that's not something that necessarily works with them.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's I think that's really great, and that's something that I'm definitely going to take on because I think I'm quite guilty sometimes of just being like you said, with your flatmates, being like, "Do you want a cup of tea? Do you want something? Can I just do something for you?" So I think it's definitely something I'm gonna implement and try and do, definitely. But yeah, thank you so much for your time today. Did you have, I know I didn't ask you this, I probably should have done, but do you have like one little like message or like one little thing you want to say before we wrap up?
No, I think, as I said, just, yeah, if you have someone in your life that you know has gone through loss,
Yeah,
ask them their happiest memory of that person
I love that.
and listen to that story, because I think it's the most powerful and impactful thing that you can do.
What's your happiest memory of your dad?
Oh, what a good question that I probably should have had prepared. Uh, what a good question. Um, Probably as a child, my dad was a big
Mhm.
Chelsea fan, and he took me to the Chelsea victory parade when we won the double.
Nice.
And as I'm a small person, he bought me a balloon so that he wouldn't lose me in the crowd.
That's so
And
cool.
going to the Chelsea victory parade, and it was me and my friend Francesca and her dad, and then my dad and some of his friends. And I think getting to do that with him. And yeah, I kept that balloon for ages. Yeah, definitely one of my happiest memories.
Oh, that sounds so cute. He sounds like an amazing person.
He was all right. He'll do.
Oh, bless you. Thank you so much for your time today, Sasha. It's been really lovely to talk about, your experience and see how you've lived with it. And because I'm not going to say you've grown from it or anything like that, because, like you said, it's always there. Yeah, so thank you so much for talking about it. And I know it's a very difficult subject. But yeah, it was so lovely to have you on.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, and yeah, for giving me the space to talk about it.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for listening to Rebloom, where we turn women's health into clarity, confidence, and compassion. If today's conversation sparked a question, or maybe a new perspective, then I'd love to hear from you. Remember, your health is worth understanding, and your voice is worth using. See you in the next episode.